Good morning everyone, and welcome to the webinar on how to write a speech or how to write a killer speech. This webinar should give you a framework, a mind map, some tools so that when you're doing your next prepared presentation, you can really make sure that it has maximum impact and the effect that you want and is persuasive or influential so that the audience walks away and does or embraces what your message is. The reason writing a speech or being able to get your speech down pat is so important is if you've got your content, your speech under control, then what you can do is you can now focus on the process, your non-verbal communication. You can focus on reading the audience, reading their body language, looking for the nods, looking for the breathing. And you can focus on being engaging and focusing on getting your message across. If you're worrying about the content, if it's the right content, will I forget something? Am I reading from my written speech? Then you can't focus on those other high-level non-verbal communications, your presence, your process, reading and responding to the audience as they change their non-verbal communication. You won't be able to respond to that if you're focusing on your content. A few more people still joining, so we've just got started. So Peter Dew's my name. I'm a public speaking trainer and coach, and my passion, my life's purpose is helping people find their voice so they can share their messages, their passion, their idea. They can get the job promotion they want. They can step up and become president of their club, or they can do and make the changes in their life and to other people that they want. And I do this by helping people become more confident and more effective. So that's a little bit about me. Let's get started. How to participate. If you're new to webinars, please participate as we go along. Although I'm at my computer and you're at your computer, we can still interact. So please ask questions as we go. The way to ask questions is to raise your hand and type into the dialog box, or just type into the dialog box at any time. So don't wait for me to ask for questions. And I do have a few places within the webinar that I will pause for questions, but don't wait for that. Just type in, hey Peter, can you expand a little bit more on that idea? Or type in your experience or your knowledge or some examples that's happened for you. So please ask questions. The second way, do raise your hand and then I'll open up your microphone so you won't have to type in. We'll then be able to hear your question verbally. Please take notes as you go. And finally, try to apply some of the thinking. And the best way to do that is to reflect on a speech you've just done, or a presentation or a speech you've got coming up. What could have you done differently? How could have you used this information or one or two of these tips in your previous speech? Or how may you adjust an upcoming speech to make use of those tips or that information that will work for you? With all my webinars, I give a fair bit of information. It's up to you to filter and work out what you can use and what is irrelevant for you. And I will record this webinar because a lot of people registered for last week and I was crook, so I will have a recording available if you wish to review this. So please just send me an email and I'll make the recording available to you. That's how to participate in webinars. The agenda. So we're talking about writing a speech. Where do you start? So you've got something coming up, a presentation at work. Where do you begin? What is your core message? How do you open up your presentation? How do you close your presentation? What 3 to 4 key points lead us to your core message? have you got the right stories? Do you know how to use stories? And I've done a whole webinar just on stories, so I'm just going to briefly touch on stories, bearing in mind I run another webinar on how to build your business stories. And I'm going to leave you with this safe and simple structure that you can use. So that's the agenda. So first of all, where do you start? It's important to realize if you're not clear on what you want to happen, if you're not clear on your core message, if you're not clear on what your audience, what you want the audience to do, then the audience could go down any path and they could walk away with your wrong intention, with your wrong message. They could walk away and do nothing. So where do you start? And one of the things I say when people are scripting their presentations is to begin at the end. And what do I mean by begin at the end? As your audience is leaving the room, what do you want them to be thinking about? What do you want them to do? What do you want to happen for the audience as they're leaving the room? Just be clear on that. And you do this by what change do you want to make in the audience? How do you want to make them feel? What knowledge must they know? As they leave your presentation, what do you want to be at the front of their mind, at the forefront of their mind? What do you want to happen when we leave, when we walk out of your room? Be clear on that. As I said, if you're not clear on what you want to happen, then people will go down different paths or they may go down no path. So it's absolute clarity around what you want to happen as a result of your presentation. That's where you begin. And that kind of gives you the overall purpose of what you're trying to achieve. So now you can start to look at the other aspects of writing a speech because you've got clarity of your outcome. Where do you start? At the very end. So just any questions at the moment? Someone's just written, what if you're doing a brainstorming or a facilitation and you're not quite sure what the end is or what you want to happen? And I guess in that kind of forum, if you are facilitating, you're not really delivering a prepared speech. But even so, most facilitations, most brainstorming sessions, management or the organisation, and let's say you're an external facilitator, and you could be an internal facilitator, most people have a reason or a purpose for bringing a group of people together. There may be a problem, there may be a new policy, there may be a change that's been imposed upon you and you now need to change your practice. So let's engage everyone that works in that area in a brainstorming session to work out how we can change these things and what are the implications. So you're fairly clear still on what you want to happen at the end, even though there may be limited structure in that facilitation process. But you'd still be fairly clear that, okay, at the end of this facilitation process, we want clarity on what are the next steps we have to do as an organisation to move forward with this new policy, this new procedure. That's a great question. Are there any other questions so far? Once again, don't wait for this Q&A slide any stage. When I say something or you've got an idea you'd like to put forward or an experience, please do that. It is safe to do that. I won't call out your name necessarily unless you want to. If you put your hand up, I will call out your name and open up your microphone, but you can type any question in at any time, any comment. The next stage, so now you know what you want to happen. You're scripting a speech. What is your core message? This is the message that everyone in the room gets, without a doubt. It's unequivocal, your core message. And you achieve your core message by asking yourself two questions. And the first question is, what do I want them to remember? And the second question is, why does it matter to them? So let's go to the first question. What do I want them to remember? So let's say I attended one of your presentations and I bumped into you down the street. The Burke Street Mall, the Hay Street Mall, Karratha Shopping Centre, wherever you may be. And I bump into you and I come up to you and I say, wow, I really enjoyed your presentation 3 months ago. I really loved that blank, 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 blank. What do you want me to remember in 3 months' time? And not just me, everyone in the audience. This is the clarity of what your core message is. And the second question is, why does it matter to them? So if I'm in your audience, why does it matter to me? Why do I care? Why do I give a damn about what you're saying? Now let's say what you're saying, as far as you're concerned, the speaker, you think it's the best thing since sliced bread. You think it's absolutely brilliant. But me, as an audience member, think, well, hang on, why do I care? That's not relevant to me. In fact, I'm not even interested in that. Then you will have no impact. If you don't have a core message, if it's not relevant to me, then I ask you, why are you speaking to me? And there's two answers. Number one, you're a stand-up comedian. And number two, you're some sort of inspirational or motivational speaker. But even inspirational speakers nowadays, they may have overcome adversity, they may have won some Olympic gold medals, they generally try and leave a core message for the audience and something that they can take away and use in their life. So what is your core message? You do that by asking these two questions. What do I want them to remember? And why? Why is it important to them? Why do I care? Once again, if you're not sure on your core message, I'll just go back a couple of slides. If you're not sure on your core message, then the audience could go down the wrong path, could get the wrong message, could have no message. You may not have any impact. So it's the clarity of your purpose that is really important. That's how you reach your core message. Ask those two questions of yourself. How to open. Now you can go into more of a traditional speech writing scenario, beginning, middle and end. So this is your beginning, or this is your opening. I've just got another question and I'll just pause for a moment. We'll go back. What's in it for me? Why do I care? I do apologise. What's in it for me? From the audience's perspective, not from your perspective, because, as I said, you may be really passionate about what's happening, but if there's nothing in it for the audience, let me expand a little bit on what's in it for me. How do you solve my problem? How do you help me overcome my concern, my roadblock? Or alternatively, how do you help me reach my goals? How do you help me reach my key performance indicators? How do you help me get to where I want to get to in my business, in my life, in my career? That's the what's in it for me. So your message needs to matter to them and answer that's what's in it for me. It's marketing 101. So thanks for that question. Now, Amanda, your hand is up. Can I assume that you want me to open up your microphone? Yes, Amanda.
Oh, am I on?
You're on.
Okay. I wanted to know, do you tell them your core message or do you build the core message?
Thanks, Amanda. Really good question. Do you tell them your core message or do you build your core message? You can build your core message, but it's important that they walk out with it. One of the techniques, and I'll just move forward one slide. So with the beginning and when we move to the end, and I haven't reached to the conclusion yet. It's called topping and tailing. So your opening statement sort of encapsulates what your core message is. You'll then keep drawing attention to it during the body of your presentation, and you'll probably tell a couple of stories that will highlight your core message. And then in your conclusion, you won't necessarily use the same word or the same statement, but you'll kind of reiterate your core message. And so people will have no doubt what your core message is. So you can build it, or one of the things that I do in my public speaking workshops is I just say fairly early on that all today is about is demonstrating to you that public speaking is a skill that you learn. That's all I want to talk about. And I'm going to give you lots of skills, but I want you to understand that if you weren't born with the gift of the gab, if you're not a naturally gifted speaker, understand it's just like any other sport. The more you do, the easier it gets. The more you practice. So public speaking is something you learn. And then I'll go through some of the skills, and I may even refer to Anthony Robbins, that great author, that inspirational speaker who talks about awaken the giant within. And Tony Robbins said repetition is the mother of skill. So public speaking is something you learn, but you need to do more of it, and you need to practice the skill. So yes, you can build the core message. And at the end, I'll conclude. So please don't let today just be a nice workshop. It's what you do tomorrow. It's what you do next week that's going to make the difference. Remember, public speaking is a skill. It's a skill you learn. It's a skill that you can practice. From what you've learned today, what are you going to incorporate in your public speaking journey? So yes, you can build it, or you can state it up front. My purpose for today is, but then you'll build it and you'll expand on it and you'll illustrate it even further. So it's entirely up to you. If you don't want to, in revealing it, you don't want to be a little bit covert and risk people, oh, there's a hidden message there, but I'm not sure what the hidden message was. So let's get to the beginning, how to open. It's called the rule of primacy. And what that really means, according to behavioural psychologists, is those first words, those first utterances that come out of your mouth, apparently the audience is likely to remember. So what it really means, what the rule of primacy is saying, is when you start your speech, the first words are important. Start strong, use an attention-grabbing opening. An amazing statistic, one of the metaphors that I use is slap them around the face or grab them by the short and curlies and make them sit up and take notice. How you start matters. That 30 seconds apparently is remembered. Milo Frank, who's a speaker, an author and a marketing guy, has written this book, How to Get Your Message Across in 30 Seconds. And he proposes that you need to create relevance, you need to have impact in the first 30 seconds, or you could spend the rest of your time struggling to create relevance. So you need to create relevance straight away. You need to create relevance straight away. If you read newspapers, if you read magazines like I do, and I've just been over reading the West Australian newspaper, very few people read every article within the newspaper, within the magazine. What we do is we choose which to read based on the headline. Your first 30 seconds is your headline. And on the basis of that, people will decide to listen or to tune out. Yeah, it's your first 30 seconds is your headline, your attention grabber that decides whether we're going to keep reading, whether we're going to tune in or whether we're going to tune out. So one thing that I've put is not housekeeping. I know a traditional opening is to say good morning everyone. Peter's my name. It's a real pleasure to be here. Can I get you to turn your mobile phones off? Morning tea's at 10:30. Toilets are out the back to the left for the male, to the right to the female. Okay, let's get started. I'm recommending you don't do that. I'm recommending start strong, step back into housekeeping later on, or if you have an MC or a chairperson, they can do the housekeeping. When I work on mining sites, the safety is a really big issue, and the muster point and the emergency exits are really important, and they like to get them done up front. So I get whoever's brought me up, whether it's Rio or BHP or Chevron, I get someone to just introduce me and do that safety announcement so I can start straight away. Start strong, create relevance. It's called the rule of primacy. The first words that come out of your mouth apparently stick, according to behavioural psychologists. Just think for a moment, how might you start? How can you grab attention and create relevance? I'll be interested in anyone just typing in how they might start. Let me share with you one of my starts, one of my beginnings. So I stand up, make eye contact, I pause. So Winston Churchill said, if you can stand on your feet and speak to a group of people, then you possess a very powerful skill. And what he meant by that was the ability to educate, to persuade, to engage, to move people to a different way of speaking is a really powerful skill. And my role today is to give each of you 2 or 3 skills so you can be both more effective and more confident. Before I move on, morning tea is at 10:30. I understand you might be busy people. Please put your mobile phones on silent. I understand you may still have to take calls, so put your mobile phones on silence, etc. Okay, let's get back to Winston Churchill. What did he mean, and what's the implication for us? Any suggestions on how you might start? It can be an amazing statistic. It can be a shocking statistic. It can be a quote. Okay. How to close. So I'm going to skip to the end now. And this is called the rule of recency. And the rule of recency, same as the rule of primacy, simply says the most recent words, in other words, those 5 minutes before you conclude, are likely to be remembered. So you need a memorable ending. End strong, have a call to action, ask them to do something, leave them with a question or a challenge. And once again, don't end with that housekeeping ending. Thanks guys, you've been a really nice audience. Please have a safe journey home. I really look forward to working with you sometime in the future. Apparently if I end with those words, you're going to remember those words, and you just have to ask yourself what value is in those nice platitudes. Thanks guys, you've been a wonderful crowd. So do end strongly. Have a call to action. How are you going to incorporate this new policy into your workplace so we do zero harm? If you only do one thing today, I want you to go home and whatever your call to action is, make it memorable, make it sticky. One of the ways to end is to summarize. So the 3 key things we've spoken about today are 1, 2, and 3. But even after that, so the summary is very effective. They're going to remember those 3 things. But why does it matter? Or what do you want to do with those 3 things? So with those 3 steps, we can make sure we do zero harm to our workers within our workplace. This is the rule of recency. This is how you end. Just as a recommendation, don't end with questions. If you finish your presentation and you end nice and strongly, and you've got 5 minutes left, and you say, okay, can we go to question and answers now? Someone may not be happy. Someone may ask you a contentious question. Someone may ask you a left field, angry question, and you struggle to answer it. And as you struggle to answer it, your credibility in the eyes of the audience slowly goes down. And then if that's the end of the presentation, people walk out with that most recent discussion fresh in their mind. Well, maybe Peter doesn't know his stuff as well as I thought he did. That was a really good question that was asked by Amanda, and he didn't answer it all that well. So make sure you don't end with Q&A. I'm not saying don't have Q&A, question and answers, but my recommendation would be, let's say you've got a 20-minute short presentation. Speak for 12 minutes. Have 5 minutes for questions and leave 3 minutes to sum up with your rule of recency. Now, if you have an MC who thinks they're going to manage your Q&A session, just let them know that you want the microphone back with 2 minutes or 3 minutes, whatever you need, just to sum up and nail your take-home message. If I can give you a true example, one of the areas that I used to work on was within the health department before I started my business, was in the area of organ donation and transplantation. So I had to go out and do a lot of community education, high schools, Rotary clubs, Lions clubs, and Apex clubs. Now, when I first started early on, I was pretty rusty and I wasn't very good at presenting, but I became more confident and I became more effective. But I still used to always end with questions, and sometimes there'd be 10 minutes worth of questions, sometimes there would be 15 minutes of questions. And I remember I was at one of the senior high schools in Perth, Morley Senior High School, and I just delivered what I thought was probably the best presentation I'd delivered for some time. I was quite confident, I had them engaged, and I still had 5 or 10 minutes to go, so I concluded with my call to action, and then questions started. And some of you who know me will know that I don't have much hair on the top of my head. So a young guy down the back of the room puts up his hand and I say, yes, because I've asked, are there any questions? And he said, excuse me, sir, can you do a hair transplant? The whole class cracks up laughing. Before I can say anything, the school bell goes and 400 kids quickly shuffle out of the room and go to their next class. What's running through their mind? Hair transplant. What a funny guy that boy was. Did you see Peter? He really didn't know where to go, and he struggled. It caught him by surprise. So, you know, it's not a bad question. Why ask it? Just because it's there to be asked. It's you know, it's a good question. But it's not what I'm talking about. So what I did from that point on was I would call for questions with about 10 to 15 minutes to go. And that question would come up all the time. And I say, look, as a matter of fact, I believe you can. And in Malaysia, they do a lot of hair transplants. But I'm not here to talk about that. I'm talking about livers, kidneys, hearts, lungs, those organs that give people a second chance of life. Okay, no more questions. And then I move into my conclusion, my take-home message, my call to action. So if you only do one thing today, go home and talk to your family, talk to your friends about what you think, what your opinion is around organ and tissue donation. Go home and have that chat with your family. How are you going to close your next presentation? What's your call to action? I'm going to pause for a moment. Are there any questions? Once again, type direct into the dialog box. And I've just received a question. At conferences, so state and national conferences, it's traditional to end with questions, and sometimes they have that Q&A panel, so there might be 4 speakers in a session, and then the last half hour they bring all 4 up to the front for a Q&A session. But even when you're doing Q&A and people ask a difficult question, just take the chance to say, and I still want you to all do this or all do that. If you're presenting and it's the chairman who insists or the program requires that you speak for 20 minutes and have 10 minutes of questions, even so, you can still break for questions 2 minutes early and have your 10 minutes of questions and just leave 2 minutes for that summarising, that call to action, that rule of recency, that strong statement that's fresh in their mind. What if you get a question at the end when you have given that closing statement? What I recommend is setting the rules around how you're going to deal with questions early on in your presentation, and not only setting the rules, but getting buy-in from everyone in the room. So I'm here for 20 minutes, so I want everyone to hold questions towards the end. Then I'm going to set 5 minutes aside for questions, and then I just want 2 minutes to sum up. So once I've finished with questions, I don't want any more questions. Is everyone cool with that? And you look at the audience and you get all the nods. So you do your presentation. Okay, we've got 5 minutes for Q&A. Okay, I'm going to end questions there. No more questions. Now, if you only do one thing today, how are you going to incorporate this? And then that's when you end. If another question comes up, you can just put that hand gesture out, that stop sign, and they'll understand that there is no more questions. One of the things I do is I also say, now, if there are any further questions after my presentation, please come and see me at morning tea. Please come and see me at lunchtime. If someone does ask a question after you've summed up, then you need to re-sum up. You need to reiterate. You know, that's a really great question. As a matter of fact, you can do a hair transplant, and it's the #1 transplant in Malaysia, where they think that hair is really quite important, and they spend a lot of money on hair transplants, less so in Australia. But even so, that's not what I'm here to talk about. What I really want you to do is I want you to go home and have that discussion. So thanks for those questions. When you speak, it's important to realise it's your gig. It's your presentation. You've put forward a paper to present at a conference, or you've been invited to speak. It's your stage, it's your platform. You own that. So just remember that. Just remember that. Okay, I've got a question from Amanda. Fire away, Amanda. Your microphone is now open.
Okay, my question is, how do you know how much information you can present, and do you leave bits out of your presentation if you feel you're losing people?
Thanks, Amanda. How much information do you give? It depends on the length of time. It depends on your core message. If you're losing people, then that's more to do with the rapport. That's more to do with how well you've connected with the audience, and whether your message is relevant and meeting the needs for the audience. Earlier on, I mentioned about what's in it for me. So that's the WIIFM, what's in it for me. How do you work out what's in it for the audience? And one of the things I encourage people to do, and it comes from a North American native Indian saying, you need to walk 30 moons in your enemy's moccasins. So you really need to study your audience before you get before them and work out what is their pain points, or what are they trying to achieve, what do they want from you. Do a pre-workshop questionnaire. I've just done some work for Chevron, and I've just done some work for Curtin University here in West Australia, and 2 weeks before the presentation I sent out a questionnaire to every participant. What do you want? What problems do you have in public speaking? What would success look like at the end of my workshop from your point of view? And I weave all of that in to make sure that I cover what's relevant for them. And what I thought was relevant, some of them just weren't interested. And one of the things I said to the workshop organizer is, okay, I understand from what you want that I'm not going to focus on controlling nerves or being more confident, because you want effective presentation skills, you want how to respond to questions, you want effective use of PowerPoints. You said, yes, that's what we need, that's what we do badly. Survey came back, everyone wanted to know how to control nerves, how to stop their heart from racing, how to stop their voice from quivering, how to control anxiety before speaking. So I've got two choices. I ignore everyone's wishes, i.e. what's in it for me from the audience, and focus on what corporate thought they wanted, or I tailor my content to meet the needs. So if you're losing the audience, it's something wrong with your content, and it could be energy levels as well. So when I do a one-day workshop, I notice that people are fading, so I need them to stand up, I need them to do an exercise, or I need to take a break. So that's about reading your audience. Having said that, Amanda, I find it really hard to engage 100% of the audience 100% of the time. And you just need to keep an eye on what's happening for the audience and work out if you need to soften your approach, if your content's not quite right. And one of the things I also do is I get feedback after every workshop. And from that feedback, I learn what went wrong, or what content could have been improved. I also learnt what really worked and what they enjoyed. So I'm always adopting this dynamic speech writing or workshop writing structure. You need feedback from your audience, and sometimes, Amanda, my presentations bomb, and I just don't meet what the audience wanted. But you find out and you adjust and you learn. So brilliant, great question. Let me, if I've got time towards the end, and please remind me by asking the question, let me show you the model and how you can make that model adaptive to 20 minutes, to 30 minutes, to 1 hour. So it's a sort of like a concertina, or like a squeeze box musical instrument. You can stretch it to 2 hours, you can squeeze it into 20 minutes and have the same impact and the same content. If I get time, I'll try to cover that. Use 3 to 4 points on your core message. So you've got clarity around your core purpose. What 3 points lead us to your core message? If I was talking to you about time management and I wanted to save you half an hour a day, point 1 might be you need to learn to delegate. Delegation is one of the keys to effective time management. Point number 2 might be learning to prioritize, and what's important and what's urgent and not important. And you can use that grid provided by Stephen Covey in 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And the 3rd point might be, excuse me, what software, what tools, what equipment can you use to help manage your time? Microsoft Project, your Google Calendar, your out-of-office email. I check my email twice a day. If something's urgent, then please send me please ring me on this phone number if something's urgent, because one of the biggest time managers is checking emails and responding in real time. So they may be 3 points. You may have a 4th point. So identifying what 3 points bring us to your core message. 3 to 4 is sufficient. Above 4, if you've got 5 or 6 points, my recommendation is that you merge a couple of points into 1 point. So you might have sub-points. It's simply because of the rule of 3, and 3 is memorable, 3 is sticky, and 3 just works. Steve Jobs, at his Stanford University speech presentation that he gave to the graduates, just Google Steve Jobs and Stanford University. I've got 3 stories I want to share with you. Steve Jobs, when he speaks at some of the conferences, those Apple conferences. We've got 3 new products we want to launch today. I've got 3 wonderful ideas to share with you. You may know that a lot of the written words is in 3. Bar Black Sheep had 3 bags of wool. There was 3 blind mice. Whoops, just go back. There was 3 stooges. Goldilocks had 3 bears. There was 3 wise men. In a court of law, you have to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. And William Shakespeare said, "Friends, Romans, and countrymen, lend me your ears." 3 points is really good, really effective, really memorable. Behavioural psychologists and research has shown the human mind can absorb 5 chunks of information at any one time, plus or minus 2. So some of us have no trouble taking on bites of 7. A lot of us, 3 is our limit. So use 3 points in your core message. Use 3 points that bring us to your core message. So this is the rule of 3. It's rhythmical, it's memorable, and they just work. Next, use your stories. So around your points, so let me go back to time management, and I don't work in time management. I have no experience in time management whatsoever. Let's say I'm talking about the importance of prioritization as a time management tool, and that was my second point. So the first point was you need to delegate, sometimes up, sometimes down. One of the things is that people take on too much work themselves and they get bogged down and, they work extra hours. The third point was use your software, use your equipment, Microsoft Project, Outlook, Calendar, those kinds of tools. And the second one was learn to prioritize. So my stories are examples, are anecdotes, are case studies around prioritization. Stories, anecdotes, case studies, journal articles around your delegation skills. So prioritization, I've got some really good examples of fantastic prioritization. Overseas trip, going on a holiday, planned, booked, organized, insurance, airfares, accommodation, all done within about a week. Painting my back fence, 2 years on, still not painted. It's winter now. I can't really paint it at winter, so I guess I've got to postpone it until the coming summer, which will tick over 3 years, and my wife is getting frustrated. So when you collect your stories that illustrate your point, the families you've worked with, the people with disabilities, the project that was going over budget over time that you were able to bring back on time, back on budget by thinking innovatively, by trying something outside the square. They're all your stories. You need to collect stories and you need to collect anecdotes. So one of my propositions in public speaking is that fear is a normal part of public speaking. And I've got a whole bank of different anecdotes, stories, examples that I use to illustrate that fear is normal. The first story is my own story as a person who stutters. And as a public speaking trainer and coach, I get nervous before every workshop and every keynote speech that I do. But I understand that that's normal. I talk about Ringo Starr, one of the drummers, not one of the drummers, the drummer, one of the members of the Beatles. And the British tabloids write about him and call him Pukey in the Sky with Diamonds. Pukey in the Sky with Diamonds. Ringo Starr vomits before every performance. So 50 years on, as a musician, he still gets stage fright. Now that doesn't stop him from doing a good job as a drummer. I talk about Sally Pearson when she was interviewed before, and she's in the Commonwealth Games, but when she was interviewed before the London gold medal Olympics, the London Olympics, the gold medal 110-metre hurdles. She was asked if she was nervous, and she said, of course I'm nervous. If I wasn't nervous, I would not be ready to race. So I've got about 10 different anecdote stories that show that nerves is part of speaking, part of any performance, part of any getting before an audience, whether as a musician, as a sports person, or as a public speaking. And the good speakers still have nerves, but they just acknowledge and understand the role that those nerves have in that person. Why build stories? Stories are your unique intellectual property. No one can say they did not happen. No one can say, well, no, that won't work, Peter. Well, yes, it will. Let me tell you what happened again. And you relate the exact story, your problem solving, your work with a family that was in crisis. Second reason for using stories, you don't have to remember them, you don't have to write them, you don't have to learn them. They happen to you. Your stories are your unique intellectual property, and you don't have to remember them. So build your bank of stories, or build a library of stories. Use case studies, examples, anecdotes, experiences, quotes, Sir Winston Churchill, and positive stories and negative stories. Don't be afraid to use that project management or that project that went over budget and over time, and what went wrong, and it was probably some confounding factor that you were unaware of. It's not that you failed in that project or that you did something wrong. It's the lesson that comes out of that. One of the things I tell people to do, and I've actually mentioned it to you today, walk 30 moons in your enemy's moccasins. You really need to know your audience inside out. What do they want? Are there any cultural nuances? What are their pain? What's keeping them awake? Earlier this year I was in Nepal, in Kathmandu, and I got invited to speak to a group of people while I was in Kathmandu. So I had a room of 30 people. And I stood up and I was speaking, and everything was going well, and fairly early on I asked the question, who in the room knows Steve Jobs? Who in the room knows of Steve Jobs? Everyone in the room, all 30 people, shook their head from side to side as if to say no. So where do I go from here? I'm stuck, I'm sort of stumbling, pause. And then luckily, I just had this recognition that the nodding, the bobbing of the head from side to side in Hindi, in Nepal, and in a lot of Indian culture means yes. So I broke my own rule. I had not walked 30 moons in my enemy's moccasins. I just turned up and delivered my content that I delivered all the time. I was invited, but I didn't take the trouble to walk in my audience's footsteps. I didn't take the trouble to do any cultural scanning. Is there any cultural nuances I need to be aware of? And straight away I realized I'd stuffed up. I hadn't followed the rules I teach in my public speaking training. So that's a negative story. So the lesson is know your audience. You know, the two-handed exchange of business cards. When someone from Southeast Asia, Chinese, Singaporean, Indian, Japanese, Korean, when they give you a business card with two hands, don't stick your hand out and grab it with one hand. These stories build your points. So one of my points is in public speaking is you need to know your audience inside out. And I've just given you two brief stories. One is mine from Nepal, where I mucked it up, and one is about the importance of being culturally aware and the two-handed business card and credit card. So when you go to Singapore and you shop and they hand you back the credit card with two hands, please receive it back with two hands. It's the polite thing to do. Use your stories. Target your stories. Use the right language. Frame the stories. Different audiences need different stories. When I work with health professionals, I can use entirely health stories. When I work in the mining sector, Chevron, I can use oil and gas, health and safety type stories. When you have a mixed population, a mixed audience, you need to use different stories that apply to the whole population. and you need to know who's in your audience. When I use mining stories, they don't work with health professionals or people that work in the disability sector. So it's about targeting your stories, picking the right stories for that right audience. Once again, please type in any questions at any stage. I'm going to give you a safe and simple. So what do I mean? Safe and simple structure. So what do I mean by framing? Does everyone know the difference between a curriculum vitae and a resume? In Australia, we use them interchangeably, but they're completely different. Your curriculum vitae is your curriculum of life. Vitae means vital life. So everything you've done, the football, the sports, the clubs, the volunteering, the raising a family is part of your CV. When you do a resume, you do a targeted resume for that job. You pick a subset of your life experiences to address a selection criteria or that best demonstrates your ability to meet that job. When you reframe your stories, you pick the right set of stories from your bank of stories, from your life of stories to meet that audience. So it's taking a subset, it's reframing. So think of your content as a big picture, and now you've got an audience full of health professionals. So take a subset of that big picture that best enables you to relate, connect, and demonstrate that you understand the audience you're speaking to. The term for that in speaking is framing your stories. Framing your resume, targeting your resume to meet your audience's needs. Thanks for that question. A safe and simple structure. You can call this one form of mind mapping. So this is what you need to do. 30-second opening. Learn it, script it. So Winston Churchill said if you can stand on your feet and speak to a group of people. 30-second conclusion, call to action. If you only do one thing today, how are you going to incorporate this new policy into your workplace? Clarity around your core message. What is it I want them to remember? And the second bit, why do they care? What's in it for them? What's in it for me? 3 points, 4 if you need, 3's good, and then build those bank of stories around each point. Build those bank of stories. And then, let's say you're speaking for an hour, you may have 4 stories or 4 anecdotes per point that illustrate each point. Now you're speaking for half an hour, do 2 stories per point. So the framework remains the same. The level of evidence per point, the number of stories, examples, case studies that you're going to talk about to illustrate each point, the importance of prioritization shrinks to 2 stories, 2 bits of evidence per point rather than 4. So you've now got a concertina mind map that by adding evidence, and the framing is choosing the right stories or targeting the stories for the audience. If that one doesn't work for you, then try a mind map. Have clarity around your core message. What is the message and why is it important to them? What's your 30-second opening? What's your memorable close? Have your 3 or 4 points, point 1, point 2, point 3, point 4. And have your stories, have your sub-points if you need to. Tell a story, make a point. Tell a story, make a point. So tell a story. So Ringo Starr used to vomit before every performance. The point is, if Ringo Starr can be nervous and have stage fright before presenting. Surely we as speakers, as presenters, as educators, we have a right to be a little nervous as well. And the point is, although Ringo Starr was nervous to the level of vomiting, pukey in the sky with diamonds, it does not prevent him from being an effective musician. Let me give you another story. Sally Pearson was asked about nerves before competing in the Olympics, and she said she was very nervous, but she was glad that she had nerves today. If she didn't have nerves, then she wouldn't be ready to race. The point is, the nervous energy puts you in your peak performance. It puts you in a peak performance as a speaker, as a presenter. It makes you ready to respond and be sharp and give your best performance to the audience. If you weren't nervous, Sally Pearson wouldn't be ready to race. If you're not nervous, you're probably not ready to speak. You come across too calm, blasé. Tell a story, make a point, and the point links back to your core message. That's a mind map. You could do a point and then bullet point, bullet point, bullet point, and then a point, bullet point, bullet point, bullet point. So if you want an A4 page of notes that just reminds you, then that's fine as well. I prefer the mind map, this mind map, or the other mind map, which is the concertina mind map that you can stretch or collapse. This mind map you can also stretch and collapse. You just have 5 or 6 stories for each point, and then you decide which stories, you decide the number of stories you're going to tell depending on the amount of time that you've got. So I think I was going to talk about how do you know how long to speak for. And that's a way that you can be flexible. And of course, if a speaker before you speaks into your time and your 1 hour shrinks to 45 minutes, you just quickly shed 1 story per point. And you can now deliver the same content, the same core message, the same conclusion and memorable statement in 45 minutes. Are there any questions? So the next webinar is on Friday, and it's about breathing as a presenter. And breathing, as I've done more research and more work and worked on my own breathing, breathing is one of the most powerful things that you can use as a presenter. Watching the audience's breathing gives you so much information, and you using your breathing, your use of pause, is so powerful in different aspects of your presentation. So that's on Friday from 9 to 10 for those who would be interested. And once again, go to my website and you can just register. Some upcoming workshops. The July ones have gone. I put this slide together ready for last week, but obviously that's gone. I've got some workshops in Karratha, Perth, 12th of August, how to have a difficult conversation, body language, thinking and speaking off the cuff, winning presentation skills, assertive communication skills. I've got some dates for Melbourne as well, so I will put them on my website when we get started. Anyone that wants any more information on this, I do have an ebook on my website, How to Write a Killer Speech, and it leads you through the process in more context and more detail than we've just been through in this webinar. So just remember, start strong, finish strong. Ask yourself those 2 questions. What do I want them to remember? And what's in it for the audience? Why do they care? Why do I care if I'm in your audience? And then collect and build your stories and put it into a mind map rather than writing a script. And that's how you can have really great impact. That's how you can know your content so that you no longer need to read from a script. And you can be confident that you will have the impact you want. Any more information, website, send me an email, and I look forward to speaking with some of you on Friday, but go out there and write your next killer speech. Thanks, guys. I'm going to leave it there.